Hey, welcome to the historic Livery Theater. My name's Rob Bundy. I know there's not much stuff in here right now. Stage is kind of sparse, but in a few short weeks, this empty building will be transformed into a technical training school, the hold of a troop ship transporting troops over to Europe. It'll become a bombed-out London, England, and will become a Nazi concentration camp. How does that happen? Well, here to tell us how that happens is my good friend, Duncan McGregor. Duncan's here. He's been doing theater for over 50 years. And we're very happy to have him not only in our community, but here to talk to us today about this show called The Streamliners. And I'm in it, and I have a lot of lines. So I'm going to sit over there and learn my lines. And Duncan will tell you all about the show. Duncan, good to see you, buddy.
Thank you very much, Rob. You're going to go over there and learn your lines.
I will learn my lines. Here's me.
Because we do have a rehearsal this afternoon. Not here, but in the St. George's Anglican Church. That's where we've been doing most of our preparatory work for this play. And then in a couple of weeks, we take over the Livery, and then we put the Streamliners in here. So, thank you for coming. It's good to see you. I know you all. So here's how it started. First of all, I'll give you a little idea of how I started, because Rob said 50 years. Well, he's right. I became a professional actor at 30, after I had been in as a teacher at a public high school in Stony Creek for 6 years. And I was asked by a company called Carousel Players if I would come and join them for a year. Well, that 1 year became 15. And not only did I perform, but I also managed and I also directed and wrote for that company. And it was all for children. And we had a very unique way of going into schools when we were doing our theater. They didn't come to us. We went to them. And so we would put on plays in which the children, all of them, 200 in an audience, would participate. And all of them would have the opportunity to participate. That's what we've done. And we became quite famous. And in fact, at one time, Carousel Players was the largest in terms of touring company in the whole country. So it was quite something. We did plays for children in kindergarten to grade 3, that was the primary, and then the juniors. They would have a different play, and then you'd have the seniors, grade 7 and 8, and high school, and then we would have something for them. For the older ones, it wasn't quite as much a participation, but our participation, even with them, is like what is going to happen with this story here. And this story of Streamliners, people don't know about them. In fact, the first time I was informed of them, they said, "Nobody knows about us, the little-known band." Well, it wasn't a little-known band. It was a well-known band in its time. But when it was developed in Canada, that made it a really fascinating band. And then it went over to Europe, and that's where it played. And it played in so many different spaces. And then at the end of the war, they stayed for another year. And they were still playing. But then at the end of 7 months after the war ended, they basically let go of the whole band. And the band never played together again after that. Although some of the artists in the band, they were playing long, long after. When they got back home to Canada, some of them stayed in England. So, and if you see the play, you'll find out some of the remarkable musicians that they were. But let's go back to when it was founded. And this was the difficulty. First of all, I was phoned by my good friend, James White. Now, James is in his 80s, okay? And I said, "James, it's good to hear you." And I said, "What can I do for you?" And he said, "Well, we've got a play, and what we want to do with the play..." "Oh, come right in if you want. I'm right at the beginning. We're talking about Streamliners, the good old band that is going to be a play here in 2 months." So, James said, could you come in and take a look at the play that he and Andy Sparling had written? Now, who is Andy Sparling? Andy Sparling is the son of one of the Streamliners. And he was told by James that his book should become a play. Well, yes, of course it should. But how? And so they had written part of the play, and I came over to James and Billy's house, and we read it together. And as I was looking through it, I was thinking, there's some interesting scenes here, but what brings it all together? What is it? And then, so I asked Andy Sparling, I said, why are you doing this? You've written an excellent book, and people are interested in it. Why a play? Because I don't see where this play is going right now. And he looked at me, and it was on Zoom because he lives in Belleville, and he said, I want to know more about my father. Oh, well, at that point, that was it. That is the thing that goes all the way through the play. So therefore, Andy had to be part of the play. Well, I wasn't going to ask him to do it because he lived in Belleville, but I had my good friend, Rob Bundy, who is going to portray Andy Sparling in this play. Now, he's not a narrator, and you've got to learn your lines, though. Yes, he's not a narrator. He actually takes part. He does things and makes things happen. And there's a thing at the end that is extraordinary, something that a son would want to do with his father. And so that is happening. So what happened then? Then they started to put it together. And then all of a sudden, as Rob said, it's going to be here in the bowels of the ship, or it's here in Gander, Newfoundland, or it's in an airplane heading over the English Channel, or it's being shot at by Nazis in Belgium. How are you going to do all that? So I had to think about that, because this is not a movie. This is a play, and the play is going to be done here. So as I was thinking about it, because the two writers, James and Andy, were so keen on getting a through line in their play, which was wonderful. And I'm the dramaturge, okay? And some people would say, well, what's a dramaturge? Well, quite simply, the dramaturge is a special member of the audience. I would look at it from what the audience sees, and if it's clear, then I'm pretty good with that. If it's not clear, or if it's messy, then I have to say, this is what it is. I don't write a word. I don't even suggest words. I suggest situations they might deal with, but that was my job, was to look at it from the point of view of the audience. Now that I'm the director of it, when we decided we were going to do it, I have to look at it even more from the point of view of the audience. And I'm going to get into that in a few moments, because that was one of the descriptors about this event. So what they did was they went through these scripts, and then we had to find out, how do they sound? And so we went to a number of places. We worked in Blythe, we were here in Goderich, and we had readings. And those readings were in front of a group of people that were interested. Usually it was people in the Historical Society, or people that were just getting an idea of what, this is really interesting stuff. So we did these readings. In fact, there were public readings 5 times. And one was in here. It was in March. And as you'll remember, the winter was not too bad a winter. But on that day, winter decided to pay us a visit. And I thought, oh dear, we're not going to be able to do it, or there's not going to be very many people. And then in came people through the door. And there were over 55, and I was expecting maybe 20 on a good day. But we had over 50 because they were keen on it. And what a reading they got. So a number of different readers from the community. Rob was one of the ones that was there pretty well every time. We went through that play. I asked them what they thought of the characters, What was the through line of the characters? And so we did all of that. And then we made the decision to contact the Livery and say, we would like to do it here. Now, why this fall? Well, this fall is part of the 100th anniversary of the R.C.A.F. And they're having, I think it was yesterday, they had the RCMP musical ride in celebration of that. And they have a number of programs, and we've become part of them. So that the poster that you have there goes to everybody who wants some information about the play. You see on the front of that, and some of you are looking at it now, you see that the band is there. That band is in Lincoln Inns Fields in England. If you go to Lincoln Inns Fields, you will find the bandstand is still there. But it was under fire a couple of times. But I love that picture because of the two women who are dancing along the side. Now, what is happening? If you haven't seen it, there it is. So we are going to reproduce that, although you're not going to see the musicians. You'll see the musicians on screens, because we certainly can't put a 15-person orchestra up here. It would just be a concert. It would be a lovely concert, mind you. But we're doing a play, not a concert. So here's what we had to do. We were starting to figure out how we were going to put this on. And the idea of the screens was one of the first things, because that will give us the idea of where they are, when they are, and what was the environment. One major scene is in a barracks where they are talking about the fact that they are mechanics in St. Thomas. They are not, well, they were musicians, and they were professional musicians. These four characters that are in that, they went to St. Thomas. One of them, of course, was Billy Carter, and he comes from Goderich. And then there was Phil Sparling and Jake Perdue, and both of them came from Clinton. And then there was one other that we've put in the play, and his name is Don Hilton, and he became the drummer for the Streamliners. He wasn't at St. Thomas as a mechanic at that time, so what they did is they went out and they started to bring people in, because the commandant of the St. Thomas base, and that's where planes, it was a huge, huge base. And we're going to see it up there, and there, and there. We've got 3 screens. And because it's so big, we have to do it 3 times. So that is St. Thomas. And so they went in as mechanics, and they hated it. In fact, Phil Sparling says, "We're going to lose the war if we keep me as a mechanic." And I think they were right. All he really wanted to do was to play saxophone, and that's what he ended up doing. So Billy Carter is called into the base commander's office, and he's told, "I want you to create a swing band." And he went, "Oh, there is a God." And actually, that line is in the play, too. There is a God. And he comes back, but he says to his friends, he says, we're going to do this, but we also have to be in the concert band and in the marching band. And I'm thinking, as we go into this, how the heck am I going to do this? How am I going to show the music that they're creating? Well, we had a couple of things. Number one was the screens. So we have 3 screens, and 2 of the projectors are going to be right above your heads. They're going to hit here and there. And then we have a backstage projector so that you can walk in front of it And you're seeing a little bit of my shadow, but you won't see any once those lights are taken out. And so we can work in front here. Now then I looked at the stage and I went, oh, geez, this is not very big and not much space. So what we're going to do is we've got these, this is a 4-foot extension. And this is going to go all the way to the wall and all the way to the wall. And then we get other 4-foot extensions, and I'm not going to walk it any further, but they're pretty close to you. There's another 4-foot extension that goes from there to there. And you say, well, how are they going to get on stage? Well, you see these stairways, they don't have enough depth in them for what we want to do. So we have to make our own stairs that go along the side and along the side. So that's how we started to really work this thing out. But I'm thinking, how do we show the music? We have the music because we have recordings of the Streamliners. And they are interesting recordings. So we had all of that. And Andy Sparling is also one heck of a guy for sound. So he's made sounds of gunfire, of explosions, of a ship, of a train, all sorts of things. And so we have that. So how do we put it all together? Well, especially with the music. We've got the story of the boys, and that's going to go on up here. Sometimes they go out there. But what about the music? I thought, and somebody else thought about it too, and they thought, swing dancers. We're going to have swing dancers. So I had a friend of mine. Well, they're two friends of mine because they're partners. They run the East Side Dance, and they specialize in swing music. And they started to advertise to their people. And I thought, all I need is about 8, maybe 10 people. 30 people later, 30 swing dancers later, they had these people, and some of them are young, and some of them are older, which would be perfect, because that's what happened at these dances. They had young people who were part of the armed forces, and then they had older people. And so I thought, that's how we do it. So they started a process of developing the dance, just not for the play, but for them to find out what they could really do in the dance. And so I'm thinking, this is splendid. Well, 9 sessions later, some of the people who were rather nervous at the beginning are now smoothly moving around the dance floor. And you say, hold on, Duncan, if you're going to have all these people, 140 people in here, how are you going to do the dancing? Well, there's 2 ways of doing it. One way is to bring them in from upstage here and upstage there. And the other is to bring them here and there. And you say, well, isn't that going to be tight? A little bit. But then we don't have a middle, what do we call it? An aisle. Yes, an aisle. I should know these things. I've been in theater for a long time. So we don't have an aisle here. And one group of them is fairly close to the stage. So what I have to do is to make sure that we work with the space we have. And so and this is all choreographed because they already know what they have to do. And they're doing the dancing. Whereas one time, we go from 1941 to 1942, right? And that's in St. Thomas. So what they do is, and I thought, how do I show that? Because that's not very interesting. You know, they just play and they play and they play and they play. But where's the story going? I want to get rid of 1941 and 42. So what we do is when we get 1941, 42, we have 1941 up there, and the dancers come in and they are swing dancing and they are having the marvelous time. All of a sudden, the music changes to waltz. And they look around, and actually they look right at Andy. And they say, and he goes, do it. And so they all start to waltz. And they waltz on the side, they waltz up here, they waltz down there. All of a sudden, 1942 happens, and Andy shouts out, "Happy New Year!" And they go, "Happy New Year!" And they swing dance again. Now it's fun again. And they come up here and they're working around and they're doing their thing and they're doing their thing. And all of a sudden, it changes. It changes into a march, because remember what I told you before. They had to be in the band, and they had to be in the marching band, and they had to be in the concert band. So this was a way of getting through 2 years. And then at the end of the march, well, where are they going to march to? Now, these are dancers, and they do marching in a different way. So there is a lot of foolishness in a way that I hope that the audience picks up, because we're still in Canada. And so this is a way of showing the difference, and yet we get to where we had to go. So where are the boys in all of this? Where's the band? They're there. They're there on screen. And the real guys who are playing them, the actors, are back there. And so that's how we do one of the scenes. So it was putting things together. Another one was at the beginning. The guys are coming in, and the scenes are all about two of the guys who didn't want to be mechanics. One comes in and he sits right there, right close to the audience, and the other one is standing behind. They have special books for mechanics. Boom, boom, down on the ground, and they are upset by what they have to do, and then they're told that they're going to be a band. And that becomes part of the action of it. This is not a documentary. We don't sit and say, well, on this date or that date, but you do get the timing, because that's important. Because if people in the audience aren't aware of full timing, then they go, when is this happening? So we got to be clear. And I hope we are. And if we're not, that's my fault, but I'll be running away by then. So that's a part of the program, where we try to make this into something else. And we have to do it 18 times, because there's one time when they're in an airplane, and the airplane is going to be up here. We have special blocks, because we can't put in sets to show what's going on, because that would take a few days. So we have these blocks and chairs, and they're sitting in a Canso plane. And they're also really worried about where they're going, because they have never actually been to Europe. But they're in that plane, and they're worried they're going over the English Channel. Now, that is not a long trip. So they're going through, and all of a sudden, one of them goes, "Oh!" Well, expletive, because this is being done. And they see an airplane. Is it a Messerschmitt, which would be a German plane, or is it an R.C.A.F plane? Well, it's a Spitfire. And so are we going to see the Spitfire? We certainly are. It goes up there. And they see it, and it's a relief. And there it's done. So there are so many things that are happening in this play. It's interesting that the writers wanted to do things that really happen to people. And they've done a lovely job of it. The first act is basically in Canada. They go from St. Thomas, they go to Gander, and which is what they really did. There's nothing that we are doing that didn't happen to them. In fact, every scene except one of the play is based on a real event that Andy recalled, because he went and he interviewed families of the Streamliners, so that he knew what had actually happened on certain things. One of those, and this is a difficult one. And so where do we put it? We put it at the beginning of the play. At the end of the war, they were ordered to go on a tour. And this tour was going to take them to a concentration camp. It's Bergen-Belsen. Now, that's where Anne Frank died. And the people who had liberated it, and it was Canadian and British and Americans. They all liberated it. And when they came in, there were bodies lying around on the ground. And since that opening, or since they liberated it, 13,000 more died from sickness, from just lack of any kind of health. And so they had to start burying the bodies. And one of the pictures we have, and they're all accurate, shows 5,000 bodies are in this pit. And you say, why are you doing this? Well, I likely wouldn't have. But the writers, and especially Andy, thought it was a very important thing, because we go back to the very beginning of my talk, where I asked him, what are you doing? And he says, I want to know my father better. Why didn't he tell me things? And even though that's a comment that many, many people make about people who have gone to war, I never heard my uncle Dan say anything about the war, even though he was in Italy. He was in the Canadian Tank Corps, and he went right through and he got hit. He didn't die, but it was a pretty close call. Never talked to his daughters, never talked to his wife about it. And yet, he was my Uncle Dan. It's like it never happened. And that's what I think is happening with these guys, too, when they got back. They led lives. But what's underneath? And that is something that Andy, and I think James caught on to it very early, that Andy thought was important, was their visit to Bergen-Belsen. And they go in, and again, they've ordered, and it's a tour, which is one of the first scenes in the play. And not the very first scene in the play, but it's in the play. So, and also what we have in the play is the observations of Andy himself. And that's what Rob is sort of not even in the play. He doesn't take part in the activities, with a few exceptions, which are just really fun. But he's over here for a lot of but he does go into the audience. He comes along here. He interacts with the dancers. And so sometimes I've been told that what I do is I break rules when I do my theater. And I don't break rules at all. I look at it from the point of view of the audience to make sure that they can see it and they can feel it and they can understand it. And because normally what I've done before, and Rob can attest to this, is that we perform down on the floor. All the lights were aimed down here as opposed to up here, because up here the audience was. And the audience would actually stretch down into almost those two beams that are along the side. And so we did a number of things, like we did Dr. Bernardo's Children here. And you remember? What a play, what a story. And we had, I think, over 25 children in it, plus another 25 adults in it. And this is Dr. Bernardo. Then there was another play that we did outside called Narcisse, and it was done down in St. Joseph's. And we were in it was an extension of the Catholic Church's, where you put bodies, cemetery, yes. And I'm 80 and it's starting to show. And so we put it there, and then we found that the highway was our biggest problem, because you could hear a bicycle sometimes along that highway. And so fortunately we had a farmer who came in and put all these hay bales all over the place. And so it was like a little castle that we had. And in that play, of course, Rob was playing Narcisse. What you may not know is in our work together, he's been a writer. And he's written a number of plays that we did over in Blythe. And what we did for Blythe was to help pay for things. That was our way of making money for them. And I did other things for children, which also raised money for the Blythe Festival. And the Blythe Festival has been so cooperative and wonderful in terms of loaning us all sorts of things. We hope even that they're going to loan us their projectors in here, because we have this one, but we need 2 more. So that has to happen.
Can I interrupt, Duncan?
Yep.
Just for a second. We should point out that the show, Narcisse, The History of St. Joseph, after we did that show, which is hugely successful, we won a Governor General's Award for Outstanding Historical Performance. I know.
Thank you very much.
Pretty amazing. Federal award. Yeah, it was really good.
Yes, and I remember picking up the award from Mr. Johnson himself. In fact, I was in the Rideau, whatever, the Rideau Hall, and I was somewhere else because it was other people were being acknowledged as well. And so I was talking with a group, and they were fascinating. And all of a sudden, I hear David Johnson saying, "Duncan, where are you? We need some pictures taken." And my personality is such that I would say, "I'm coming, David, I'm coming." You don't do that in Rideau Hall. Fortunately, something caught me, and I didn't do it. So we got there, and we have a picture to prove it with him as the Governor General. So we've done a lot of these things. And people say, "Well, why do you always do history?" And my answer to that is we don't do history. We set it, perhaps, in a historical environment. But what we do is we tell very specific stories of people in the play. This is going to happen with Streamliners. I'm not interested in the historical events. I know the historical events, and people do too. They know about the war, perhaps, but they don't know about the war the way these guys do. And that is the thing that we're going to show. So that's a key to what we're doing. So if any of you have any questions, I sort of run out of things sort of to say because I don't want to give too much away about the play because you're all coming to it. And Billy has actually been a very important part of the development of the play because of her observations as we were doing the work of talking about the play. Yes?
I just wanted to say that a show like this is so important, and for a number of reasons. All these guys are gone now. No one's ever heard of them. No one's ever heard of the Streamliners around here. But it's an important story. So those guys are gone. People die. But their stories can live on as long as someone like Duncan tells them, and James, and Andy. Good show. Runs from the 16th to the 27th of October. Is that what it is? Yeah. And tickets apparently are going very quickly. So if you want to see this amazing production, give the Livery a call, stop by the box office, and get your tickets. Or give me a good one.
You can go online, and it is one of the easiest online ticket things I've ever seen. And you get a receipt within minutes from that. So do that. And for some people have asked about who could see it in terms of children. And I'm thinking that about 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds they'll be able to respond. I have a 13-year-old granddaughter who is ready to see this play and wants to see it. So that it's good for that. And for older people, this is an accessible theater. There's a washroom over here, so if somebody comes in a wheelchair, usually they tell us that before, and then we set that up for them, so that if they need that wheelchair takes the place of a chair. And if it isn't, then we take the wheelchair back. So we try to make sure that everybody has accessibility to this, and you can see just coming through the front door, there's nothing that's getting in your way. Except, no, I'm not going to tell you. There is something, especially as you arrive. Because if you get here at 7:30, there's something happening. Okay, it's not just coming into the theater. The theater is active. And we want to create that environment. Okay?
It's excellent, yes. We're certainly looking forward to the show. It's going to be very different than a 2-act play. That's not what it is. It's a bit of an event, kind of like Narcisse was. It was an event, not just a play. A lot of work goes into it. A lot of really talented people are taking part in it, and we're looking forward to getting this plane up in the air and bringing it down for a successful landing about the end of October.
Nice image. Nice
right?
image.
Okay. All right. That's it for us from the Livery for right now. Thank you very much for joining us here. Thank you, Duncan, for coming by. Don't forget, get your tickets for the Streamliners.